Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. For those of you who this is your first time joining our webinars, obviously this is a slightly off the cuff one, but I'm Agnes. I run Pelican Arts Rev with Ben, who's just there. And we just wanted to take this opportunity, given the current climate, to talk a bit about remote learning and the fact that it's becoming a much larger reality of a successful instrumental learning. So I wanted to take this moment to bring together both Ben and I to talk about it, as well as a panel of teachers and some parents who have experienced online learning for a long time, to discuss what we've learned, how to make it successful, and to answer kind of any questions that you might have. I'm going to talk a little bit myself to start about the world of remote learning. And then open the floor up to our panel to discuss and talk about their own experiences, how it's been helpful for them, and to answer any questions that you'd like to put to us. With us today, we have a selection of teachers. The ones I know are here, but please shout if extras are here. Jamie McRae, Charlotte Amherst, Zach Owen, Andy Bushell are here. I think I saw Katie Simon as well, but if there are any others, now's a good time to just unmute and say hello to everybody.
Well, Ellie McMurray as well.
Hello.
Ellie McMurray, that's everybody? Great, good selection of teachers, long-term teachers with us. So that's really positive. We also have a couple of parents. Nadia, whose daughter actually learns with me, started online classes with me while she was still in Key Stage 1. And Claire, whose son was in Key Stage 2 when he started online classes. So there's the two sides of the coin there, which hopefully be helpful. So we'll talk to those guys a bit later. I've muted everyone to start with, but there will be a chance for questions at the end of the session. Please use the chat feature and ask any questions in it, and I'll try to have a scan through at the end and get everything together, and Ben will also monitor it to just make sure we're covering everything that everyone wants to ask. Okay, so what is remote learning? Obviously, this might seem like a really obvious thing to talk about, but we'll just go through it. So remote learning is a one-to-one lesson with your instrumental teacher through our video tool. The aim is for it to be as close to an in-person lesson as possible. What we're really trying to achieve is literally just taking what you were doing in school or after school and putting it straight into an online situation. There should be no major differences in how it's delivered. We really recommend that as far as possible, they try to stay on the same day and time if possible, so that routine is kept for students and teachers, and we maintain that sense of normality with their musical education. Both student and teacher can see and hear each other as they would in an in-person lesson. Teachers can also pre-upload resources, notes, theory, tasks, anything like that for you to download and use, either prior to the lesson or after the lesson, as well as sound recordings of them demonstrating if necessary. We can really use it as quite a communicative tool, which can be really useful. Remote learning means that students can continue, obviously, with their musical education, when in-person is not possible, i.e. school closures, or even holidays, or even if your teacher's abroad. You know, one of the things we're really discovering is actually, although we hadn't used it before, there are actually loads of positive uses of remote learning outside of the slightly negative school closures and things like that. It really just ensures that students can continue progressing and can continue to be engaged with music and musical learning. So what have we learned? Well, the first lockdown was obviously a very steep learning curve for everyone. In early 2020, remote learning was something that most of our teachers had never done. I had never done it personally or experienced at all. However, the first lockdown forced everyone to very quickly learn about it and go on this quite steep learning curve. But over that time, teachers have learned how to get the best results virtually, having to adapt their styles of teaching to keep students engaged, changing the way they would normally demonstrate something and just generally adapting and including parents in the learning process. That's something that we've really seen an increase in, and just by seeing all you guys here today, that shows that is something that is really key. Why didn't we do it in March? Well, for Pelican, the resources required at the time of lockdown to safely and securely support online teaching were just simply not available to us. So supporting online learning and learning the pros and cons of what did and didn't work without a full administrative team and a tried and tested platform was just not something that we felt that we were able to safely and do in a quality way, to be honest. So that's why we took that obviously very difficult decision not to support it as a company. However, many people still continued with their teacher during that time. But what's different now is obviously over that time we have merged with the Arts Revolution, and that's why we are a combined company, which has meant we've been able to launch our new portal, which has that safely inbuilt into it. We have many more systems behind us, and we have a combined workforce, which means that we can actually support that. We've also taken the last 8 months to really learn from our own work as teachers and from other businesses and what works and what doesn't, and adapt to those things. So obviously 8 months down the track, lots of things are different. People have learned lots of different things. So we obviously want to be very honest and talk very clearly about the pros and cons. You know, we're not going to shout from the rooftops that it's the be all and end all of learning. However, there are pros and there are some cons. The pros that we want to talk about, something that we've really seen is the increase of the relationship between teacher and parent through online learning. Obviously, that doing school tuition, it's something that is actually very hard to maintain because their lessons are happening just without you. And with this with online remote learning, that interaction massively increases, and we really see that improve students' progression tenfold. Equally, side-by-side learning therefore takes place because parents can help the teacher, act as the teacher, but also learn a little bit about what their child is doing, especially if you don't feel very confident musically. Having that teacher to really explain and help has really helped a lot of parents learn how to support their students in their practice as well as during the lesson. There's a much better connection with progression, so you really see and can understand and discuss with your teacher, you know, how your child is progressing, what worked, what didn't. There's that immediate contact there, which has proved very useful for a lot of people. The lesson time is incredibly focused because obviously when you're in a school environment, you know, there are certain things you come and you unpack your instrument and you see it, and that, you know, in the general scheme of a lesson, those things can be lost. However, with remote learning, we do see that obviously students are ready to learn. They've got their instrument out, everything's set up, everything's ready, and so they get that very focused, intense time, which has been really useful. And obviously continued progression over taking a break. I mean, what we really, the marked difference between children that took lessons over the last lockdown and those that didn't was huge when we came to September, and it really showed a lot of our teachers how big that gap could be. And so we really learned, and a lot of teachers felt that online lessons is better than no lessons for sure. And they really saw that progression, and the ease of getting back into learning in person was much easier having taken remote learning. It also just helps keep interest and engagement, even if you don't feel like they're making the same, you know, improvement week on week as they might have been in person. Just by having that time every week, it keeps them engaged with music. It keeps it in their language, in their world, and it makes it a lot easier for them to come back into that normality. And without sort of going, oh, well, I kind of have left that now, so I'm fine without it. Just keeping it ticking over is so important with all music learning. And something, a lot of feedback, the last thing that we got a lot of feedback from parents was actually, interestingly, not even so much about the learning aspect, although that was positive. It was having a weekly one-to-one interaction with another person and another person in their educational life aside from their school was a really positive point for their child during their week. And it was a routine that they knew they were going to have, and they were going to see, and they were going to see another person. And I think that's really interesting. And that's something certainly as an adult I thrive from, and I'm absolutely certain children thrive from as well. So some of the cons that are there are, obviously we're not physically present. And so it can be hard to correct some things. Technique is specifically a challenge. I've experienced it myself. Although that being said, at the moment, we aren't able to physically correct children in person because of our COVID risk assessment anyway. So there's not as much change, but still there's more of a barrier because you are not physically there. So demonstrating can be a little bit harder. Teachers have to work a lot harder to really show what they mean, really interact with the camera in order to get their point across, as opposed to really just being in front of them and showing them what they do. Playing together is harder. Something a lot of our teachers do in their in-person lessons is play along with their students so that they can hear what it sounds like together with someone else, so that it's a little bit more put together. But with us, even with the very, very best technology, there is still a delay. There is still a slight delay, so it's very hard to actually play with a student unless you can anticipate that delay, which some of our teachers are able to do. But that's why we really encourage playing with recordings and things like that, which is obviously completely possible. And that's why we try to do things like our put together ensemble performances and things. Changes in the relationship dynamic is something that teachers have experienced. So obviously at school, it's a neutral zone for learning. It's a learning zone. Children are in the mind space of learning, and transporting that into the home and onto a computer can sometimes really drastically change that dynamic. And that's something that we work very carefully with the parent and the teacher. And we have to try different ways of adapting to keep the child engaged. And equally, spontaneity can be a bit more challenging, but it's not impossible. But obviously you can't just pull a piece of music from the shelf and give it to them. There's a little bit more planning in that. A few more games and things like that have to be put into the learning. But really, in conclusion, in-person learning is always the preference, but online learning is essential to maintain interest and progression in the face of no contact. I saw it with my own students, the difference between the students that carried on throughout that time and the students that didn't. And just not even the progression, just the level of interest in what they were doing was drastically different. So I think just having that weekly contact and weekly moment with your instrument is incredibly important. Some of the tips, obviously we're going to have some more spontaneous ones with teachers, but just a few very general ones to talk about. So Key Stage 1 children and complete beginners will need an adult present throughout the lesson. Number one, that's part of our online safeguarding policy, which will be sent to everyone if you haven't already received it. But also, just because of age and point in learning, they really just need someone to sit with them throughout the whole lesson. Now, that shouldn't be something that should be scary in terms of, I don't understand music, I can't support. Honestly, at that level, anyone can sit and help. Really, our teachers' job is to make it possible for you to understand, and if you've got any questions, they're there to help. You're just as important in that seminal stage of learning as the student is actually. Checking your setup in the first lesson is really, really helpful. So checking with the teacher that the view is good, that they can see everything that they need to, kind of stops the need for students to change it. And I'll go, oh, I'll just fiddle with this. And then it, you know, and accidents happen that way. So just checking the first time that it's good, that everyone can see what they need to, that's really, really helpful. And it just means everyone's gone, yes, you can see me, I can see you, perfect. Discussing always what worked and what didn't work. I think that's more than ever, we always encourage communication, but if something isn't working, discuss it with your teacher, see if there's something else that another way we can do it, another way that it can be learned. They're there to help. They want to continue teaching and they want to make it work. So don't be afraid to discuss what could make it easier. Checking your online practice diary. So part of the new portals, most of you will have experienced, is that there is an online practice diary that teachers can fill in. And obviously without the presence of the red books, this is what they will be using. It sends you an email, tells you everything that they have to do anyway. But you can then obviously respond to your teachers, email them back, ask them any questions, interact with that, and they can help clarify anything that you don't understand. Keeping lessons at the same time to maintain a routine is something that I think is incredibly important. Where possible, it just keeps that structure for students. It also enables them to have a stable practice regime as well, which means that they get the same amount of practice in each week. They know what they're aiming for. They can make consistent progress. If it chops and changes, it's very hard for them to kind of work towards that goal of, that's my next lesson, this is when I have to do this by. Even if it's a little practice, it will make them feel a lot more confident and stable in what their next goal is and what their next point of achievement is. So those are my sort of general top tips at the start. I'm going to now open it up to some of my teachers to start with, and talk to them a little bit, open it up to the floor, talk to them a little bit about what was working, what was and what they've learned over the time. So Jamie, why don't I come to you first? I guess I'd love to know, what your experience is at the beginning and why you feel it's, quite important from your sort of standpoint as a guitar teacher.
I mean, overall, my experience has been pleasantly surprising. I think actually a lot of students made more progress, probably because they were at home and had nothing more to do than practice, but made really great progress and more than I expected. And it's probably, as you were saying, partly down to parents being involved and, kind of, even if it's listening in the background, they know sort of what to expect and what to listen for and, can point things out.
Yeah. Charlotte and Zach, what are some of the ways that you feel like you've adapted your teaching because of in an online kind of sphere? What are some of the things that you've had to adapt to?
I think one of the challenges, I'm a violin teacher, was tuning instruments has been something that we've had to sort of try and teach the parents how to do. Have you found that as well?
Yeah, tuning is one of the biggest challenges.
I'm really sorry.
We often kind of found that there's videos kind of on YouTube, which can also kind of help in the meantime to understand how those complications work. And actually, that was something else that improved was even the kids started to understand how tuning an instrument works, which is something that's kind of beneficial over time. But mainly the parents were able to kind of keep their own instruments in tune in the midweek as well. So practicing was able to be slightly more consistent because the instruments were in tune, and it makes it a bit more pleasant for households, I suppose.
Yeah, for sure. Andy, how about you? How do you feel like you've had to kind of adapt as a teacher to sort of some of the online challenges?
I think at times you need to trust kind of the kids a little bit more as well. They have to take a little bit more ownership over the stuff that they're doing. I noticed with sometimes, like depending on where cameras were angled and how they were angled, you'd have to trust that they were fingering things correctly, or the passages weren't maybe as clear as they could have been. So you'd have to kind of, go through it with them, say, are you using this fingering? And then kind of trust them every so often that they were ensuring that they were doing what they said they were doing, if that makes sense. So it kind of gave them a little bit more ownership. I mean, I've been doing it for the secondary school. I've obviously been teaching solely online this year. And I have to say, it's been, initially it was kind of, I think, a bit tricky for everybody, but very, very quickly everyone just kind of got into the hang of it. And, it's absolutely grand now, I have to say. And as you said, it's definitely the way forward to make sure that consistency and just progression doesn't get halted any further than it has been since the start of this,
Yeah, for sure. Ellie, as a woodwind teacher, are there any sort of specific questions that specific sort of challenges you've come across, and do you think what's been positive for you to see in your students and how they've kind of reacted over this time?
I think overall they've just become a little bit more responsible for their own learning, actually, and because I can't physically be there to put music in front of their face and move things along, I think actually it's been really nice to see the majority of them take everything on themselves. Woodwind wise, the hardest thing is when instruments break, because that does happen, but I've had parents who have watched all the YouTube videos, and now they know how to fix a flute, which is absolutely wonderful. Because they break all the time. So I think, as everyone said, it was such a shock at first, but actually you find ways around it, and every student is different, I think.
For sure.
But overall it's positive.
Claire, I'll come to you as a parent. What would you say the benefits of kind of carrying on with tuition were for you, and what was your experience as a parent going into it?
So really positive on two sides. One, from a musical perspective, I would say, so my son plays the guitar and is in year 3, and his progression has been amazing, and actually throughout it hasn't even just been like a holding position. I would say he's definitely a lot stronger, and things as a result of consolidating his learning regularly, things really clicked quite a lot a couple of months ago, and he sort of took a step change of an improvement. So I've really seen that his playing has improved, but also from a routine and a discipline perspective, it was so important for us when we were in the first lockdown, just having that regular slot with a teacher to give like a regular sort of interjection from someone who he respected. Home learning was difficult for us all, and we all missed the presence of a teacher, and to have someone that he identified with as someone from his school environment that kind of via a screen was at home, it was really valuable. So yeah, sort of from a behavior and a discipline perspective, as well as a musicality perspective, it was really good.
That's really interesting. I think that continuity is something that we've heard from a lot of parents, actually. And Nadia, for you, obviously, Ishbel was only 6 when she first went online with me. How did you find that sort of transition to online learning, and how do you think that benefited her?
I think it's been great. I mean, Ishbel would of course prefer to see you every week, but I think she took upon it as a duck to the water, and she absolutely loves music and loves having lesson. And I think for us it's been such a blessing to have that music on weekly basis in the lockdown, and I'm kind of dreading if we're going to go into another one. I'm thinking that every single family is going to benefit just from having music regularly. Of course there are challenges, but generally I think it's been a very positive experience. she managed to actually pass her grade 4 just back in December, having solely been taught online since March. So it's perfectly possible she got a distinction. So the great thing is that, I mean, I do sit at the lessons, I take notes. And if parents have not been able to do that, I think it's quite a good thing for parents to understand what it takes to learn to, play an instrument. I play the piano, but I have no idea about the violin. So it's really interesting. And sometimes she teaches me. So I think the children, they also get this kind of sense of agency, that this is something that they can do, their parents can't do, and they often like to show off. This is what I find with Ishbel. So I would ask her a question, and this is something that you wouldn't be able to have with your kids. So I think it really works. You get to know the teacher even better. You kind of make friends. You get to see someone else rather than your people you work with and stuff. And I think your children, they just get the routine, they get music, and I think ultimately, Ishbel's been looking forward to it every week, and she misses it when there are holidays. So, yeah,
I think
it's all very positive.
Yeah, and it's been a journey, and I'd say as a teacher, obviously I know Ishbel very well, but for I was certainly concerned as a teacher going in of teaching someone that young. Online, and how that relationship would maintain. But actually I found very quickly that I was able to adapt how I spoke, how I engaged, what worked, what didn't, and kind of setting out those boundaries and setting out those expectations became a lot easier. And actually she took that on board quite quickly and realized actually it's very similar to my in-person lessons. The expectations are the same, the boundaries are the same, and that led us a sense of security to the whole process.
And also just all the young kids, they absolutely love the technology. So actually having a legitimate opportunity to go online and to actually have this kind of online relationship with someone is wildly exciting. So I think, kind of looking forward to it, and then be able to show off what you've done plays a part. And I often find that she now records herself when she practices, because she wants to hear it and stuff, and this is definitely something she wasn't into before. And when we suggested it to her older sister, who never had an online lesson as a child, she was absolutely mortified. So I think they get more used to actually listening to themselves play, which will then thus in return improve their playing, their performance, and they're generally much. So I think that it takes learning on a different plane, but as you very eloquently said, it has a lot of pros and some cons, but overall, when it's a necessity, it's actually quite excellent, and I could not recommend it more. So
I was also going to say on the sort of technical side of things. So my son needed some adjustment on his the way he was holding his instrument, and it was surprisingly manageable even through a screen. Really reassuring that even though as you say they can't you can't sort of show them in person or adjust their hands. He got it. And the other thing I was going to say was I was amazed that they could tune his guitar over Zoom, over the online lessons, and he's doing it. He can hear it with some coaching, but he can hear it, and he's making those adjustments himself. So these sort of technical things that you think there's no substitute for an in-person experience, actually they're really manageable.
Yeah, I would say actually that's something that a lot of teachers have echoed, is actually the agency, or as someone put it, is massively increased, because there is a self-sufficiency that has to happen, and things that we as teachers potentially don't dare teach in person when they're young because we're scared that it might go wrong or something might happen, like tuning, we were sort of made to teach. And actually it's taught us a lot as teachers that actually it is possible, and we can do it, and they can do it, especially with some help from parents. A lot of things have become more possible. Ben, do you want to share some thoughts anyway, but also read some questions, and I'll sort of post them out to people?
Yeah, can you see me?
Yep.
Great. So yeah, really interesting comments from all the teachers and the parents. I think generally there are two sides to everything. Obviously there are the pros to remote learning, and then there are some cons as well. But I actually think overall that the additional benefits from remote learning actually, I think in a long-term basis, even if there was no COVID and there was no lockdowns, that actually I think going forward, remote learning is going to be a really key part to learning an instrument. You know, we're used to very long breaks over the summer holidays, and that can often really disrupt a child's lesson from learning from year to year. So by being able to keep the rhythm going and continually learning through long breaks, I think it's going to be a wonderful addition going forward. And actually, one of the greatest challenges from working solely in schools is, as we've touched on, that the teachers don't get to meet the parents often. And that's something that we've discussed at length. How do we combat that? Because actually, I think that's really important. I think the parents building a relationship and a rapport with the teachers really goes a long way with how well the child develops.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we've discussed all sorts of things like, could we do like an online parents evening where you would get to meet your teacher that way? Or but actually, I think, you know, taking a remote lesson every now and then through the breaks, Easter break, Christmas break, summer break, and just getting to chat with your teacher, see what they're learning with the kid, how are they doing the lessons, I think just gives parents so much more confidence about what's going on in their lessons and what are the challenges their child faces, how can they support their child's practice on a daily basis. And I think those are some of the biggest challenges that parents face from music tuition. So I think there's a lot of benefits, but let's not deny that, yes, there are some challenges too. So those are some of my comments. Now, we've actually got quite a few questions that have come in, so I thought we could tackle those. So the first is the online practice diary available only using ArtsRev? So the Pelican ArtsRev system has the practice diary feature built in for the teacher to make comments about the lesson. So when they mark the lesson complete on their admin side, they can write a little note. What have they been learning? What's to practice? A bit like your red books that you're used to. So this is available to anyone who is learning with Pelican ArtsRev, basically. So if you're learning with us, you will have the online practice diary. You should get emails every week if you get sent one online. If you're using the red books, you know, then your teacher might not do an online one. But so there's that one. So we've got another one. So as a piano student, where would the camera be best placed, and what would the teacher ideally like to see on Zoom? So that's actually
I think that's probably one we can post out to a teacher, I would imagine.
Yeah.
So should we say, Andy, why don't you come in on that one as a resident piano teacher?
So I think it depends just specifically what device you're using to show like whether you're using a mobile phone or whether you're using a tablet or a laptop or whatever. Generally, if it's a mobile phone, I've had people kind of wedge it up at the end of the piano, so I can actually just see I can't see much of the child themselves. I can see their hands and I can see the keys. I can just see the lower part of their face or whatever. So when they talk, whatever, I can see their face, but so I'm not talking to a headless person. But that works pretty well. Alternatively, if you're using a laptop or if you're using an iPad that needs to be propped up, if you can kind of put it up on like a chair or something just slightly higher, again, just tilting the lid, just so you can kind of see the keyboard, that's kind of the best, or at least that's what I found as being the most useful.
Fantastic. So thank you, Courtney, for that question. Amelie says, I feel I would need a 5-minute chat with the teacher at the beginning or the end of the first lesson. Would that be possible? Who wants
Yes,
to answer that one?
I think in short, yes. I think most of the teachers here, I'll open it up to them in a sec, but teachers feel free to unmute. But I think most teachers would say yes, absolutely, especially during the first lesson. If you need to kind of, find out what was going on, if there are any kind of problems or how successful it was, our teachers are always kind of happy to chat to you and then say, obviously, if it's going to encroach on their next lesson, that might be a little bit more difficult, but equally they can arrange a time to kind of chat you through it. For sure. Are there any teachers that want to jump in there about that?
Definitely helpful.
Yeah.
Sometimes you might have a child who's not so good at practicing, and sometimes that chat is quite a useful one to have occasionally. But generally, having parents in lessons has been extremely helpful. Extremely helpful, and the kids have made loads more progress with that in mind. So definitely,
yeah, I mean, I would say exponentially as a teacher, even just my experience over the years, regardless of online learning, having parents involved, active, part of the learning process, part of the lesson, is the difference often between fast rate of progression and not so fast. And I think that's a really important thing to encourage, and all teachers are very happy having a really involved parent that really wants their child to succeed. Okay.
We've got another question from Kenneth. Do all music exams go on hold during lockdown, or can they be done online? I think, Agnes, you are the person to talk about this.
Okay, so that's an interesting question. We are looking at it. So our current, it's a conversation we're having at the moment. Now, currently the ABRSM theoretically are holding exams. They're not happening online. That's a different type. You can't do the performance exams that way, but theoretically they are still booked. However, we are looking at whether we think as a company it is a sensible thing to do exams this term, considering working towards something, considering what happened in the summer, where a lot of children worked very hard towards their exams. We had several grade 8s going on, and then literally a week before their exam, it was cancelled. And that was very hard for a lot of students. They felt very lost, and then they didn't know kind of what to do the next term, whether they should redo the same exam, or whether all of that was very kind of difficult to kind of get their heads around. So certainly something that we're looking at, and that we will send more information out, is doing our own mock exams. So where either Ben or I will sit on a virtual exam session, and we will assess them in the same way that an examiner would be assessed, so that you can feel like they've achieved that level or haven't, or had some feedback on that. But given how A, expensive, and B, kind of time consuming, and the extra things that are needed to prep for an exam, like working with an accompanist or all those things, I think on balance taking exams this term could be tricky. I'd really love to hear what some teachers think about that, actually. Anybody that kind of wants to jump in that has some thoughts about that? Any teachers?
If you don't, it's a hard one in some respects, because I know from the other school that I work in, kind of similar when things got bad there in December again, and there was more and more cases in the secondary school of COVID kind of cases and that. A lot of them then, although they were ready to do their exam, were then told they weren't allowed to do the exam because they physically weren't allowed to go into school. And even though they themselves might have had COVID, they may have come in contact with somebody with COVID, and it just stopped the whole thing. And it was very disheartening. I had a few students who were supposed to be doing kind of grade 5, grade 6, that kind of, and it kind of felt like their work was for nothing in lots of respects. Yeah. I mean, it really was quite, for one guy in particular, it was very demotivating. I don't know, the way things are at the moment, and because everything's so up in the air, it might be kind of the correct thing to just kind of take an official party line on it and say, well, this is what we're going to do because this is the most reasonable course of action over the next couple of months. And then hopefully, I mean, we can all hope by the summer term that some semblance of normality has returned. That would be my thought on it.
Any other teachers? Got any thoughts?
Should we move on? Quite a few questions. Fred has posted a link for any piano students who would like something to help them point the camera at the keys. So that's helpful. Thank you. Kenneth also posts another question, which is interesting. So in the first lockdown, did students progress slower with online learning compared to face-to-face? And if so, how much slower?
I think I'm going to open that up to, some teachers, but then also key in our parents as well that have experienced it. So Ellie, I'd love to hear from you.
I actually interestingly think it was the opposite, that the majority of students, I don't know if it was because of maybe their schoolwork was lightened and so therefore they had more time on their hands, or if it was because their parents were involved much more in their musical learning. But I actually found that they got a lot better in the first lockdown. For what reason, I'm not entirely sure. And you know, it could also possibly be because I was a lot more focused with them about specific things. I'm not entirely sure, but actually, yeah, interestingly, it was the opposite that I found.
Yeah, I found that as well. Zach and Charlotte, how about you guys?
Yeah, I think I definitely found like the same as Ellie. It's not necessarily slower, to be honest. I think it's a lot to do with parental involvement. You're obviously, we're teaching the child, but when a parent is sat there by their side and they learn about the instrument as well, it kind of duplicates the learning process, and somehow in many regards it actually speeds things up. So if anything, I found that their progress was in many cases improved.
Yeah,
I'd agree. I had some kids who started from scratch, like a week before lockdown. They had their first violin lesson, and it may just be luck of the draw, but one of the girls that was doing that has done extremely well. I don't know whether it's having time outside school to have a lesson, probably helpful, just sort of time to focus on that. And also I've had quite a lot of parents again who've emailed saying thank you because you were the only teacher she saw or he saw each week, and it gave them structure. And you know, I would say that none of the kids that I teach responded badly to having lessons online at all.
Yeah,
I was very skeptical to start with.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. Claire, what do you think? What's your experience as a parent?
So I think initially there was a period of adjustment. I think it was hard. I think, like we were saying, you know, Nadia was talking about the excitement of that they've got to being legitimately on screen, and you know, that was a bit fidgety initially, but then he knuckled down, and I think his progress has been better than it would have been actually. And I think that some of that is because of the link of having me around and me developing that relationship with his teacher, meaning that I can reinforce what he's supposed to be practicing a lot more easily than if I'm just following some notes in his red book, because I'm able to ask questions and just, you know, just sort of reinforce what we're hearing. So yeah, I'd say that the progression has been better since online.
Yeah. And Nadia, I mean, I know what I think as a teacher, but I'd be interested to see what you think as a parent.
Okay, I truly, honestly don't believe that she would have done much better if she was seeing you every week. However, I do wanted to say that if you are doing online for a very long period of time, or kind of, you know, 2, 3, 4, 5 months, I think because Ishbel has done that, that, you know, by the end of the summer term, there was a certain fatigue, and it
Yeah,
was
for sure.
definitely that, you know, she would have at that point, you know, much more benefited from one-on-one lessons. And then I think if you go to school, if you have one-on-one lesson, you know, things happen all the time, you know, there's diversity, you don't get fed up. I think there's definitely a danger of that kind of fatigue, and hopefully this is not what's going to happen. We're not going to be locked down for 5 months. You know, the vaccine is here, you know, it's a finite time this is going to last. And I think, you know, for that reason, I didn't think there should be any worry that, you know, kids won't progress, because they do. And I think the only time they maybe stop progressing as much as they could is if it becomes I mean, that happened to all of us as well. You know, when the lockdown becomes too much, everyone kind of falls apart and stops really working and being very productive. So I think it's really the length of the time. But I think if there's a possibility, you know, of kind of mix and matching, and, you know, that certainly happened with us, that when, you know, during the summer, the couple of times we saw you, that really made a difference, and that kind of gave us a new elan to go on online. But yeah, I think as long as it doesn't last for, you know, half a year, they'll be fine. And even if it lasts for half a year, if there's an opportunity to just come back for like 2 weeks, you know, it just resets the whole thing.
A
You know,
circuit break.
even just exactly, even just the one lesson, you know, and then, you know, we'll kind of give energy. So I didn't think she would have been in a better place if it wasn't. I mean, yeah, maybe
No,
I would, but
I agree. But obviously, for context for anyone else, we'll move on to the next question. For context for anyone else, Ishbel has been learning pretty much entirely online since March, because I am not local anymore. I'm further away because I was shielding myself. So she hasn't even had that circuit break of going back into school and having to in-person lessons. She's only had about 3 probably in-person lessons in an 8-month period. So that's a slightly more on the extreme end of the scale. Ben, next question.
Yes, so we've got a few minutes, so we'll try and get through these quickly. Can remote lessons be scheduled outside of the school day if a child is a key worker attending school? So I'll answer that one quickly. The answer is yes. The important thing is most people, the teachers will be very busy with loads of kids on their schedule often. So, but there's nothing stopping you asking your teacher basically what your situation is, and can you basically get a slot slightly after school or something. Just ask. Teachers will be accommodating where possible. So thank you, Anna, for that question. Alina, Agnes mentions an info pack was sent, including info about parent presence being required for Key Stage 1. I do not believe we have received this.
Is that the online safeguarding policy? That's probably what we mean by that. So the online safeguarding policy will have been sent it should have been sent if you've received online lessons from any teachers. Teachers were sent it, but it's something that we will put on our website at the end of today anyway, so that anybody can access it, and we will send a link to all the parents that you can watch and look at. It's in line with all schools. Safeguarding policy, it's something that we have done in conjunction with our schools and passed by our schools as our online policy.
Great. So we've got Ellie Cornwall. Is there a difference between using Zoom and the portal? I can answer that one. Yes, there is. So inbuilt to our system that we've basically been developing is an inbuilt video tool. Now this only allows you to connect with your teacher at the time of the lesson. So it's a very secure platform. This is why we really strongly recommend that all teachers and all parents use the online video tool. Obviously technology can be a bit precarious. So depending on what computer you have or browser, you might find that some tools work better than others. So give it a try before the lesson, just to see if it works. Basically, you need to go to the website and log in. There's a login button on the website to get to your portal. Click on your lesson. If you click on the calendar or something, it will give you the lesson for the day. click on it, and there's a big fat button that says video tool. Click on that, that should connect you to your teacher.
And it's worth just pointing out that as there will be a slight lag while we receive information from teachers. Currently, everybody's lessons will be scheduled at 9 a.m. You will still be able to use that lesson on that day, as long as, even if it's not at the specific time, because it's a lesson booked. Once we start hearing from teachers on when exactly their time is going to be, we will start updating that our end. The reason they're all at 9 at the moment is because during school time they get rotated, so we can't constantly give them a new time, it just gets rotated.
And then final question of the day is, what happens if you don't have the instrument at home, i.e. a piano? Piano teachers, does someone want to discuss options here?
So I would, yeah, Andy, you
sorry,
go.
Well, I suppose just to kind of ask a little small bit more information about that particular person. I suppose it depends on kind of what level the child might be at. If the child is kind of a little bit further on, has had a few lessons and kind of knows we can do, I suppose one could do rhythm games, kind of theory exercises and kind of things like that. It does make it kind of difficult, I'm not going to lie to you. It's hard to teach the piano if you don't have some sort of thing there to kind of practice or play. So I don't know that I have an amazing suggestion for that one, if I'm totally honest.
I mean, I would recommend, if you're having trouble finding a piano, I think it's important to understand when we say you need to have an instrument, we don't mean an acoustic upright piano. Many people just have a keyboard. There are actually lots of options out there that aren't too expensive to get a keyboard. You can just put it on a tabletop. Anything is better than nothing. And I mean, on having the instrument is kind of the first step on making improvement. So I would really recommend just writing into us if you've got any questions, or your teacher, and asking them for some advice on where to get a piano, and so that you can do it. You're going to have a successful learning relationship if you have an instrument at home.
Great, fantastic. So I think that's all the questions for today. So should we do some closing remarks?
Yeah, so I mean, teachers, any final thoughts, any thoughts kind of going forward for the term of what you'd, online learning, what you want to do, how I don't know, any final thoughts on this, and equally, parents?
Please have your kids set up before their allotted time, because otherwise you can waste lots of time, and always have a pencil as well.
Yeah, pencil's good.
I think also just communication is everything, and we are, as teachers, I think I can speak for all of us, that it's much better to know kind of how the week's gone than not know anything at all.
Yeah, so I think that's a really important point, actually, Ali. I think sometimes we get forgotten in the kind of, it's sort of assumed that we can see everything and know everything, and actually it's really helpful if you've had a difficult week, if a child's had some things going on. It really helps teachers adapt and actually make their lesson better and more supportive and more able if they really understand the circumstance, because it just makes it a better teaching relationship, especially online, because we all understand that everyone's having some challenges at the moment, and all we want, everybody's intentions are good and they want to support, and I think that's quite important. Claire, did you have a comment?
I'd echo what you said. I mean, we had times in lockdown when my son was having a really tricksy day, just the stress on everyone from being at home, and we went online, and I was like, look, he's not in a great place, I don't know how this is going to go. And typically at the end of that, the teacher would go, do you know what, that went okay, and it sort of reset him. And back to what I was saying about the sort of discipline and the structure, and having that relationship with a teacher in a, when we're at home and not seeing teachers, was so beneficial, that it benefited him and us and progressed his learning. So yeah, I'd really agree with you.
Yeah. Jamie, any thoughts?
If I push the right buttons. Well, yeah, make sure you're comfortable with the technology before you start, I think. But yeah, everything from being in tune and having a pencil is actually, yeah, pretty useful. Yeah. And you
Are
can
there
always
any
start
sort of
learning as well.
techniques? I mean, without delving too, I realize we're short on time. Are there any, I know you've got quite a wide range of, you know, very young beginners to more advanced. Do you have any sort of advice for parents of children on the kind of beginner end of the spectrum and younger end to kind of really help that along as a teacher?
I mean, being there, because like even turning the page on a music stand can be difficult when you're, you know, when you're 4 or 5 and, you know, things fall over and then you start giggling and we sort of lose concentration. So, I mean, just your presence is enough and to kind of keep, you know, they're in a new environment as well. So staying focused is it's hard, a challenge, but
yeah.
Yeah.
Great. And I think, you know, my final thoughts are, I think a really great way to keep encouraging children is to keep feeling like they're achieving. So, you know, record them when they've completed a piece as if they were going to perform it, get them to perform it to you and celebrate it and make them feel like they've achieved something is something that I use as a teacher, and it's really, really helpful. Equally, you know, we did online concerts, we did virtual concerts last term. We will do them again. Undoubtedly they will be virtual, but we want to continue celebrating what children have achieved. So do use that and really try. We're going to be trying to innovate, which is one of our core values, to give students more opportunities to show what they've done and finding ways to kind of really interact with their music learning, even though it's not in person. So do kind of try to take advantage of those things and celebrate them. And equally, you know, if you know people that are a bit uncertain and you feel, and, you know, just talking to them and reassuring them of your experiences, if they've been positive, is something that's so helpful for us, because we can't reach everybody. But actually, often if you can just try it and talk to other parents that might be a bit nervous, then actually that journey becomes a lot smoother. Wouldn't you say, Ben?
Yes, absolutely. I think my final comments would just be that remote learning has some huge benefits that you wouldn't otherwise get if you're just having it in school. So I think let's capitalize on that as much as possible, working with the teachers, working together to make this really successful for your children's successful future. And I guess I would see it as a bit like a balanced diet. Too much of one thing is not good, not enough is also not good. So I think, you know, having a period of remote learning and then a period of in-person is going to actually be a very healthy balance. So yeah, I look forward to seeing the results of how people do over the next few weeks, and good luck with the next announcement, which is in an hour with Boris. And I wish you all a very good week. Yeah, and we will see you yes, soon. And as ever, please do communicate with us. Please do let us know if you've got any problems, if you need any help. We are here to help. We are here to sort it out. So please do talk to us, and we will try to make sure that goes smoothly for you guys. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye. Bye.
Thanks very much.